back to the Present Life Podcast. My name's Aaron. This is AJ. And we're here as usual, just chopping it up here. But in the last few weeks, I feel like something keeps topping the headlines, and it's the idea of DEI. And if you don't know what DEI stands for, it stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have quite a few thoughts and feelings about these initiatives. And but there's a quote that keeps honestly popping into my head regarding this. And I apologize for starting off hot here, but it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I kind of feel like that's what this has become. So before we get into our discussion today, I'd like to start off with that disclaimer. I mean, in no way do we feel like the true definitions of the word diversity, equity, and inclusion are bad goals to have for our society. No, in some way, I think the intention behind it is mostly good. But I think to myself, like, okay, well, the intention behind like welfare in the 1950s, 60s was good. Let's help the single mothers, but then it leads to a massive increase in fatherlessness. Just one example. I mean, Hawaii tried to eliminate rats by bringing in mongoose in the late 1800s. And what did it do? Well, now we have a mongoose infestation in Hawaii. So there are a lot of great intentions that we have as a society. But I feel like we have an issue, AJ and I at least, with some of these well-intended, quote, ideas and how they're being implemented into our institutions and the negative effect that they're having on society. And once again, us as fathers, us as people of faith, and us as, people that focus on family. So what is DEI anyway? I mean, what is the intention and how far has it strayed? What are these policies, done to change the landscape of the country that I feel like used to be considered the greatest country in the world? What do we do as citizens to even combat some of these harmful policies? And perhaps most importantly, what would Jesus, have to say about all this? So let's get into it, shall we?
I'm ready. You sound ready to go. always, man. Go ahead. Start
It's an interesting thing. And once again, so let's start off with some definitions. I am the English teacher here, right? So according to Wikipedia, and I would say a lot of other sites, DEI is considered an organizational framework which seeks to promote, quote, the fair treatment and full participation of all people, particularly groups who have been historically underrepresented and are subject to discrimination on the basis of identity or disability. So lots of things. But first off, I'm thinking about just this definition. Fair treatment, that sounds like a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But full participation of all people, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
In your mind, like if I was going to say, how do we get the full participation of all the people in the society? How could you even fathom that happening? Could you see a society where there's full participation from all people?
Well, let's touch on, the vaccine, where they tried to get everybody to participate by starting to give away free goods and services and drugs and alcohol and free everything because they wanted everybody to participate. We've seen kind of how that goes. And it didn't necessarily go well. They didn't reach their goal of having, and obviously there's more to that, but that's just what pops in my head is it shows, and we've seen recently that it's extremely difficult to try and get everybody to essentially think and believe and feel the same way you do.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing too is, God created us with free will. So now why are we trying to make everybody the same?
Yeah.
And if we're trying to make everybody the same, well, then we're going to do a lot of things to force people to do certain things and force people to have certain acts. I mean, like how do you create or make people be, for example, not racist? Well, you can't. I've said the phrase before, but, the problem is sin, not skin. The answer is grace, not race. And we're trying to make it this thing where, well, let's make sure everybody's equal and force things to be equal. Inherently, you're going to make things not equal.
Yeah, that gave me chills actually. The skin and the race thing that's 100% true. And I've got a heavy opinion, and I've been sitting on this one for a while. God doesn't discriminate at all. He does. I mean, I look at racism, and obviously it's about the color of your skin. What if we were to be divided by the color of our eyes or our hair or our height or our weight? But for some reason, way back when it started with, well, your skin color is different, so you're going to be treated differently. And this isn't a podcast on racism. I mean, it's obviously a big part of DEI and all that, but
totally.
But, the first slave owner was black, selling blacks. That doesn't make racism okay. I'm not going to get into that. That's once again not focusing on that, but that's where it started. That's how it started. I mean, it's not just, it's turned into, well, whites versus blacks, whites versus everybody.
Yeah.
You know, the white privilege. And I'm sitting here as a white guy talking about it, and then it will be viewed as, okay, well, this privileged white guy sitting here talking about all of this stuff, and you come from a different position because of your Asian descent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can sit here and I do not believe personally in privilege. I believe in God's favor. And I think focusing on all of these things, like you were saying just a minute ago, when we're focusing on trying to force people to do something they don't want to do, there's going to be problems. Yeah. And with this whole DEI thing, you're forcing people to try and get in line and do what you're told, and it brings me to, you know, kind of like the government has done with different things even recently, but you know, more so in the past, and things like Nazi Germany. If you don't get in line and do what you're told, then or else, that becomes very dangerous. And ultimately, I think if any of these things are focused on, I don't think the focus is where it should be. Yeah. Like you were kind of getting at just a second ago. I'm going to just throw that out there. The focus, if the focus in your eyes are not up or on God, then, and they are on these things, then your focus is not where it should be. I don't disagree with these things like you were saying when you started. These can be positive things when gone about correctly. That's not what we're seeing with these things, and I'm sure you're going to jump into that.
Totally, and let's get into those. I mean, let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think when we look at the actual definitions of diversity, well, it's the state of being diverse. It's variety. And when we think about variety, what's the most important part of variety? I would say it's variety of thought. It's the fact that we can have these differing perspectives, or you can have a differing perspective out there, and you have the right to have a differing perspective. And honestly, the First Amendment doesn't need to exist unless we're offending someone. So if I'm offending you, sorry, that's my First Amendment right. Yeah. And that's an important part of the way that we exist here as Americans. And so diversity should be diversity of thought, not diversity of skin. Yeah. And I mean, MLK, we just celebrated celebrated him in the last couple weeks here, and I think that was the point, is let's not look at this color of our skin, but the content of our character. We're now looking at people and judging people rather than content on the character and merit-based. Mm-hmm. We're looking at fitting quotas, and I mean, let's get into that in some sense too, like back to when we actually put together the Civil Rights Act in 1964 that, allowed or set up, obviously, an anti-discriminatory kind of stance for our country, not discriminating on the basis of sex, race, or, national origin, color, all of these different things. Well, if you don't know, maybe you don't, but Senate Floor Manager Hubert Humphrey declared the bill would, quote, prohibit preferential treatment for any particular group. And he added, though, I will eat my hat if this leads to racial quotas. And where are we now? We're at racial quotas. I mean, United Airlines just came out and said they're going to have 50%. Their goal is diversity. Why doesn't their goal, like, people not dying in the sky?
Safety, yeah.
Safety. Yeah. I mean, we spent 2020 and 2021 with even mattress companies telling us our number one priority is safety, when we knew that was not the case. Like, you make mattresses. Yeah. Like, and now we're having a Boeing or a United Airlines saying that our number one goal, when it should be safety, is, having black people in the cockpit. Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, like, I think representation is an important thing. Yeah. I, as an Asian American growing up as a kid, there were certain things that I looked at and maybe thought to myself, can I really do that? Even Major League Baseball, all I had was Ichiro growing up. Yep. And we looked very different. And so, and the fact that now there's a guy named Stephen Kwan, playing for the Guardians, that's a cool thing for me.
Go
but
Beavers,
also,
go Beavers.
Exactly. But guess what? Why Stephen Kwan's in the in the MLB? It's because he's good. Yeah. Not because he's Asian. Yeah. And so, yeah, sorry, it's gonna get a little heated,
No,
here today. But
and I wanna say something, because you're making incredible points, and I think what God created us all different, to think different. Yeah. We all have had different life experiences. We all perceive different. What makes us great, or excuse me, what makes us different is what makes us great.
Mhm.
That's it's so incredible when you sit back and you look at all the different races, if you will, the eye colors, just the hair, all of it. It's incredible. We're all a work of art.
Absolutely.
And when we lose focus once again on our eyes being up, and instead of our eyes being up on what it should be on, for us as Christians, we believe our eyes should be on the Word of God, on our eyes focused on Jesus and who He was and His message. That's your eyes focusing up, right? Heavenwards.
Mhm.
But when our eyes are down here amongst the devil's playground and we're letting people down here dictate how we think and how we act and what we do, we get to where we're at.
Absolutely. And and when you say life experiences, we all have these different life experiences. We've gone from having life experiences and respecting each other's life experiences to saying that your life experiences is the truth.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It's just not. There is truth and there's my truth, which that's not a real thing.
One truth.
There isn't my truth that actually is connected with reality. They're different things. Truth is reality. And so I think that, if we're moving on from my diversity into equity, let's look at that word. Equity is justice according to natural law or right. And this is how Google is looking at it. And I wouldn't say Google is, biblically based. Natural law or right, what's that come from? It comes from God. So what are we looking at here in terms of equity? Well, justice according to natural law or right. Well, what's justice? Justice is administration of what is, okay, especially by the assignment of merited rewards or punishments. Why don't we, if that's the focus here, why don't we look at that? I feel like instead we're pushing, rather than equality of opportunity, we're pushing equality of outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That you guys, regardless of where we are, what your background is, like everybody's going to get this chip at the end of the day. When no, you all have the opportunity to play the game, but there's only one trophy.
That's right.
It's just, and so, I think about, for example, Job 34:17-19 says, "Can he who hates justice govern? Will you condemn the just and mighty one? Is he not the one who says to kings, you are worthless, and to nobles, you are wicked, who shows no partiality to princes, and does not favor the rich over the poor, for they are all the work of his hands?" That's how God is looking at justice, looking at equity. And now we have this state of our society and of our country, I feel like that is just hates justice. We're letting people come into our country that are convicted terrorists, that are convicted rapists, that are just, and I hate to say horrible people because we're all horrible people in some ways.
Yeah.
But legally, not good.
Not good.
And I don't know. You have any thoughts on that before we keep rolling? I mean,
well, you're going to get me into the current state of my family, and that is, it's getting to the point where our country's being invaded, and we saw recently. You and I shared a post together recently where someone was crossing the border down from Mexico to Texas, and he was asked a question like, "Hey, who are you guys? Where are you from?" And the guy turned and he said that you don't know who I am just shows how stupid you are. But you'll know soon. Guys from the Middle East, and they looked into it after he had fled and gone into our country, and now he's wherever he is. He could be down the road. Like,
no
we
one
have
knows.
no idea.
No one will know.
And he ended up, he was a convicted terrorist, and now he's here. And he was like the leader of one of the clans or whatever over there in the Middle East, and he was imprisoned, and then he was let go, and now here he is. The other day there was they stopped 10,000 Chinese military-aged men, a group of 10,000 who were together crossing. They stopped them. Oh, okay, go ahead. And not that means anything. Those could be normal people, but you look at the people who hate our country. In Boston the other day, you had a rally, and Graham Allen and Benny Johnson and Charlie Kirk and all these guys who are on the same page as us. They're believers, and they in line with our morals and values. They share a video of these guys, and they're like, "This is not the Middle East. This is not China. This is Boston, Massachusetts," and it's just a huge rally about Israel and the USA are the biggest threat today. Is what they were chanting in the USA. They are in our country, having rallies, scaling the White House walls, doing all these different things, chanting about our demise, and there's nothing being done about it. And it's, when we start talking about, equity, and overseas they switch it to equality. I think they do like EDA, I think it is equality, diversity.
Well, and they even have this thing called JEDI, which is JEDI,
Yeah, I saw
and they
that
add
as well.
justice in there. You can't have justice and equality.
Yeah.
They don't fit together. Like justice comes from God, and it means that you are not treated exactly the same because you have done different things.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be treated like a illegal immigrant that has done illegal things. But now I'm in some ways we're all being treated like that, and we're certainly being taxed to support it.
Look at California. It just came out and said all illegal immigrants are going to get free health care.
What about us?
I was paying $1,000 a month a while ago for my family to have health care. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What, like, that doesn't make any, and there's no rhyme or reason. It's full of confusion. Confusion does not come from the Lord. We know where it comes from, and that's kind of how I'm looking at everything, and that's why we're doing this podcast.
Absolutely.
We're taking what's happening in the world today, and we're putting it up against the Word of God, and it's becoming very clear to me, and we'll get more into it in this episode and for sure the next one. But it's becoming more clear to me what's of God and what is not.
Absolutely.
And the Bible is a book that people say the Word is alive. And we've talked about it before. The Word of God can mean one thing here, and then 10 days later can mean the same exact verse can mean something different. Well, it's coming alive. Revelation is starting to come alive. The end of the Bible, the end times, is starting to come alive with things that we're seeing happen. That's not of God. That's not of God. That contradicts the Bible. That contradicts the Bible. And it's coming from our leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing different states who are woke or have that leftist ideology that are grabbing onto that. And you see the division, which is ultimately who the devil is at his core, divisive. He divided heaven with his actions and who he was. And so I could rant all day on that, but the state of my family right now, we're looking to go be somewhere else, not in this country. We are and you know that. I'm bugging you about it. Like we are currently looking to move somewhere else and be somewhere else because we feel like, as a coach and as an athlete, when you have a team, like if you're a leader on a team, you've been a coach, you always hear it starts at the top.
Yeah.
And it trickles down.
Skunk stinks from the head down.
Exactly. and that's where your success is going to come from, and how it's going to look for you, and it starts at the top. The top of what we got going on here is all bad, and it seems intentional, and it seems destructive, and it seems careless and selfish. I don't want to live in that. I can't live in that. I can't raise my kids in that. I read something the other day that Charlie Kirk wrote. He said, "This is not the country you grew up in. Your kids will not be growing up in the America you grew up in." And I think back when I was a kid and I felt that freedom. It felt different. It looked different. It sounded different. It tasted different. It hit every one of the senses. It hit every one of the senses differently than it does now. Now, there's something in my heart and something in my gut. It's not sitting right. It's moving me, physically going to be moving me potentially elsewhere to a place where I can take my family to be safe and feel supported and feel like at least there's problems everywhere. There's evil everywhere.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I have to sit in it and take it. But whatever God wants for us, we're going to do. So I kind of ran with that, but I appreciate you asking how I felt. I needed to get that out.
I know. I mean, I feel the same way. We're talking about it like, let's go to Italy, And so it's, and I think so many days that sounds like a fantastic idea. And I look at, historically, if you look at civilizations throughout history, pretty much the max amount of time that civilizations exist is about 300 years.
Yeah.
And we're in the 278, 279 kind of range here in our country. And so also you look at history over, civilizations over history, and it tends to be that the downfall of civilization, for most civilizations, there's a massive focus on sexuality. And and look where we are here. That it's so this. I mean, we've also gone to this idea that, back in in the days where we grew up and when our parents grew up, people talked about obligations and responsibilities to their family, to their country, and now it's all about privileges and rights. It's all about me, 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 me. Let's be a victim so I can get some stuff and so things can be better for me.
Backwards.
And it's like, unfortunately, like, and this is kind of one of the age-old questions here too, is like, well, how do we work with poverty? And there are always people who are going to be oppressed and all these kind of things. Well, guess what? It says in the Bible, Deuteronomy 15:11, there are always going to be impoverished people. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. Not, you have to do this or else we're going to put you in jail. It's like, no, you need to look up. You need to have this relationship and this understanding from a biblical standpoint and a humbling and submitting standpoint that what I want is not that important. And it seems like in America, well, we have this pursuit of happiness, and that's what's life, liberty, great stuff. Pursuit of happiness, all selfish.
Yeah.
And so, let's move on, I guess, to inclusion here. And inclusion, when we have diversity, equity, inclusion, including is great. But like, think about when you were a kid and, you have, you're playing around sandbox with a couple guys or whatever, a couple of your buddies. There's some kid that you don't like because he's a bully.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the teacher just said, you need to include Billy over here.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to get punched in the face.
Yeah.
I don't want to hang out with Billy.
Yeah.
Like, he's a jerk.
Yeah.
And so, like, if it was, hey, maybe Billy is having some trouble at home, maybe you should love on Billy a little bit. Well, then it comes from me.
Yeah.
And it comes from a point of grace and humility and understanding and Christ. But we can't just try to play God. And if we're going to try to play God, like, why can't we just let God be God? It's a frustrating thing overall that we've just kind of got into this whole thing. And that's the next thing I guess we'll get into with what would Jesus maybe say about diversity in general, as I drop my pen 7,000 times here.
Third time's the charm. You're good. There you go.
But, we have this mentality in our country, and it stems from DEI, is everything is oppressor oppressed. And, if you guys don't know, that comes straight from socialism. That comes straight from Russia. Essentially, like, and I could go into this a long ways, but the KGB and Russian, ideology has been infiltrating countries all around the world for the last 60, 70 years. And you don't know it, but it's like when you have ideas, they have consequences. But when you have bad ideas like this, you have victims. And then you have people who are actual victims and people who have created themselves into victims. And here we are. Everything is just oppressor oppressed. There's so many more identities that are important in our life than oppressor oppressed. And there's one, in fact, that means more than anything. And it's, yes, I'm Asian, I'm white, I'm Japanese, Swiss, Korean, Danish, French, all that. But no, I'm a child of God.
Yeah.
And that should be what my identity is. And that should be the most important identity. And it's just, it's saddening, it's disheartening that, we used to kind of hide some of our difficult identities and something like that because we were struggling with them on our own. And now it's let's fly the flag of all of our identities so that I can feel like I'm marginalized and that you should feel bad for me and that you should give me things and that I am entitled to anything. Because guess what? We're not entitled to anything. I'm not entitled to this next breath. If God decides that I've done my deed and hey, I know I'm going to heaven, so if you take me now, that'd be a bummer. But hey, yeah. It also is going to be, it put me in, I wouldn't have to go to Italy to be in the great, to be in a more positive place.
Yeah. You've said a couple things that have clicked for me. First of all, identity with everybody these days wanting to identify with different things. You can identify with whatever you want, but there's two identities, and like you said, it's a child of God or not. And then there's what goes under those. Okay, child of God. This is what you will ultimately identify with. If you're not a child of God, and it's your choice to be a child of God or not, you will identify with this. You also a little bit ago, we're talking about like the sexualization of everything. Most of what we're seeing people identify with has everything to do with how I identify sexually, whether that's I'm transgender or I'm LGBTQ, and like why are we even sharing what we care about or what we do sexually.
Totally.
That is such a personal thing. That's supposed to be such an intimate, private thing, which it's been for so long. I mean, but now it's just turning into, well, I'm as a lesbian or gay or transgender. Like, all that has to do with like your sexual preferences. Essentially, there's more to it, obviously.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's what we're talking about. Why are we talking about that?
Well,
Why is that the conversation? What?
Especially in schools.
Dude, okay, should we get into that? Should we get into that? Because
DEI, that's where it's hitting hard.
Yeah, and
institutions.
Yes, 100%, and that's a huge problem. And there's not necessarily a problem, like you said at the very beginning of this, with DE or I, but there is a problem when it's pushed this way. And we've got leaders out in Washington trying to get books on rape and bestiality and all those type of things pushed into schools, and they're fighting to get those type of books into schools for kindergartners and first graders. I have a kindergartner. I have a first grader. I've got kids that age, and you're telling me that those are the things kids need to be putting in, what you put in is what comes out. Their excuse for wanting to get these into schools and into kids' ears and into their heads and their hearts is because you've got to give kids the ability to identify with that stuff. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
If a kid that has gone through that and can identify with that, all that's going to do is cause it to be brought up and brought out. That's traumatic.
Absolutely.
There are certain ways to go about helping a kid who has been through something like that. It's not bringing it up in front of the class.
Yeah.
So that's all garbage.
I mean, I couldn't imagine having one conversation with any of my students. My students are high schoolers.
Yeah.
About my sexual orientation.
Yeah.
Why does that ever need to come into a conversation? Ever?
It doesn't.
It doesn't ever.
It's not
important. I mentioned stories, like my wife and I were at In-N-Out. It's like, I'm not saying anything about my wife and I in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Because why would I? First of all, makes me feel uncomfortable even just mentioning it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I know.
But then in front of students, it does not make sense. It just seems very selfish, entitled, and controlling.
So let me play devil's advocate and respond in a way I think that the other side would respond to this, and that would be, well, people need to know. People need to know so they can act on it, so they can take action. It's like, what? That is not an answer. So if you say, why do people need to know what my sexual orientation is? And the response would be, well, others around you need to know. Well, cool. Then I don't know. Put it on your Facebook or your Instagram if people care enough. They can go look there. But to talk about it, to flaunt it, it's just lust filled. It is that's at the core of it is lust and selfishness and just pleasing the body and all that type of stuff. And all of that is contrary to the Bible.
Absolutely.
Contrary. So child of God, not child of God, you choose. And we'll get into more LGBTQ and transgenderism and all that stuff as we move forward with this season of the Present Life podcast. But if this episode interests you, this is episode 6, then you need to listen to episode 7 because we will get more in depth with episode 7. That's going to happen. So tune in for that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of frustrating things going on. But I think we will wrap this up in a little bit. And I think there's one thing that's really just been on my mind, and it's 1 Timothy 6. It's 3 through 19. And I think about, well, how should we interact with this as Christians? How do we, because we can't just be up in arms. We can't be, disrespectful. I mean, we could, but that's not, I think, what God has called us to do. But we need to remind ourselves what is actually happening. And in Timothy, it says this: if anyone teaches a different doctrine and does not agree with the sound words of our Lord Jesus Christ and the teaching that accords with godliness, he's puffed up with conceit and understands nothing. He has an unhealthy craving for controversy and for quarrels about words, which produce envy, dissension, slander, evil suspicions, constant friction among people who are depraved in mind and deprived of truth. Imagining that godliness is a means of gain. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. That's what we got here. We got a society puffed up with conceit who really understands nothing. I mean, it's like if sanity could be on the Republican or Democratic ticket for 2024, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Because we've lost that as a country here, and craving for controversy and quarrels about words. We see people with, for example, pronouns getting so frustrated that I don't understand that your pronouns happen to be something that is different than what I'm looking at. And I had a conversation with a student, I think last year, that said something like, hey, well, I have another teacher who doesn't respect my pronouns, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, have you ever thought of the fact that, I know that that's what you believe, but then by making your teacher, for example, subscribe to those particular pronouns, aren't you making him believe then what you believe or do different things than what he or she actually believes? And once again, you can't control these things. We have the First Amendment, we have all of these things, but we're just getting into a point where we're trying to take all of these things out of the world. Well, Satan brought them into the world. We got to deal with them. And the only way we can battle is putting on the armor of God and really going to battle for him and for each other. But unfortunately, everybody's going to battle for themselves.
Yeah. And listen, this stuff is going to continue to be an issue, and it's going to continue to come up. But it is good to see the boycotts happening. It is good to see. I mean, you see Anheuser-Busch. You saw it happen to Bud Light when they with the inclusion, and Target, and
Sports Illustrated just fired all their people because guess what? I mean, you had sorry, but Sports Illustrated it's always been about the peak athletic body or performance or whatever it is. 2 years ago, they had an obese woman on the cover. Last year, they had a man.
Yeah, which are also
for the swimsuit edition.
No. Anti-Christ things that are being pushed to demean God, and just where our world is. It's this is the devil's playground, folks. If you don't understand, this is the devil's playground. Like he wasn't kicked out of heaven and sent to hell. He was saying, here, this is where he is until Jesus comes back. Then he's gonna drop kick him to hell. Or cross him up, you know what I'm saying? Give him the crossover. The holy cross. He's going to get that. But I'm telling you, this is the devil's playground. The things that are happening, the Bible talks about when we get towards the end, the things that you thought were good will be viewed as evil, and the things that you viewed as evil will now be considered good. And you see, C.J. Stroud for the Houston Texans gives glory to Jesus Christ after the game, the first thing he does, which is nothing but a positive message. The message of Jesus, like we say all the time, is positivity, love, and just everything that goes with that. So to say that and to mention that name, there's power in that name, is all positive. You're going to eliminate that, and you're going to edit a clip to take that out. And so the name of Jesus can't be heard. If that's not in your face demonic, dude, it's heaven or hell, it's Christ or the devil, it's the light or the dark, it's all those things we talked about in one of the first episodes. The two lists I ran off, it's one or the other. People got to pick a side. And if you can't see what's going on or you don't understand and you need help, hit us up. Hit up the Present Life Podcast, and we will help you. That's what we want to do. That's what we both know we're going to heaven. You know you're going to heaven. I know I'm going to heaven because we have Jesus in our heart. It's that simple. You don't have to do. It's been done. Okay?
Absolutely.
Jesus came and did it. People make it too complex. It's not complex. It's the simplicity of it confuses people. The level of love confuses people. It can't be that unconditional. No, it is. You accept him in your heart. You accept his message. If you don't know his message, go read it. It's incredible. It makes you feel a certain way and see things a certain way. It changes you. It transforms you. It renews you. It literally is living, like we were talking about earlier. And I'm getting to the point where I'm so passionate about seeing people, or even different religions. For example, I have a passion for the LDS community. I'm going to come out and say that. We live in a big LDS community. The LDS community is off base, in my opinion. They're off base. And we can sit here and we can have a full episode on the LDS community and that belief and how that is off base and where they are wrong and it is incorrect. It actually contradicts the word because
Absolutely.
they say they're Christians. They say they use the Bible, but then they need the Book of Mormon to help with the Bible because the Bible was translated so many times that things were lost.
Which is not true.
Even if that was true,
Exactly.
still can't prove it wrong. Still no holes in it. So why does it need your help? It does not. So anyway, I don't mean to just call that out because Catholicism is going a different way. I grew up Catholic, and I've told my kids my kids are curious.
Islam, Buddhism,
all of it.
It's all works based.
All of it.
If you want to work to get to heaven, good friggin' luck.
Good luck
man.
with that.
I just, you're never gonna make it. It's just not gonna happen. Like, and that's, I think back to Josh McDowell. He's written a book called More Than a Carpenter, which is really great evidence-based arguments for why Jesus exists and why the Bible is true. And when I think about how he says, how he talks about that, oh my gosh,
Josh,
yeah.
But I can't wait you told me about that book
Yeah.
and you just reminded me, so I appreciate you saying that because I'm downloading it as soon as we're done with this episode.
Now I can't remember the quote that I was saying. But
we'll put it in the show notes, so tune in for that. I promise it's going to be great because everything come out of your mouth, bro. It's uplifting and it's fulfilling and I appreciate you, man. The research this guy does, the time this guy puts into it, he makes us outlines for each episode. We talk about what subject are we going to do, what are we going to talk about, and he puts together outlines. Mr. Teacher over here takes time with a wife and 2 kids and a full-time teaching job and a coach, and he puts together these outlines with incredible information that is legitimately life-changing for me to be a part of. Just to sit here and go over your outlines, I feel it changing me. It uplifts me. So thank you. It's okay that you forgot a quote. You're human too.
now I'm like, I can't even remember what the quote was about. But I know
I'm surprised it's not written down
I know,
here.
right? I'm like, is it here somewhere?
No,
but yeah.
But yeah, let's wrap this one up because we got another episode that we're gonna get going on too. But man, close us. How do you want to close us? It's been great.
Yeah, I mean, hey, let's close in a quick prayer. Why don't we do that?
Heck yeah. You want to take it?
Yeah, I got you.
Take us.
Oh, Lord, thank you. Just thank you for this opportunity to talk to you, to share your gospel, to really, and now I'm remembering too because you're here, what that quote was from Josh McDowell.
Share it.
And just this idea that Christianity is not a religion. It is God coming to create a relationship with us. Religion is basically just man trying to work its way to heaven. And it's just not going to happen. We can't work. Jesus was perfect. We're not going to even be close to that. You sent your son. I can't imagine, I'm going to get emotional. I can't imagine sending my son to die. But you did it because you care about us. And you wanted a relationship with us. And so we get frustrated, Lord, with the state of the world because this is not what you intended. But you also know, and you have this fervor and hope and knowledge because it is done, because you've already won. And so we ask to continue to be humbled by that message and lit a fire underneath us from that message, Lord, because we're going to stand up and we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to put on the armor of God. We're going to continue to have the word be our weapon and wield that in a way that exudes grace and love and empathy, but maybe not acceptance, but love and understanding that that's what you would do first, Lord. You would love first. I mean, I'm wearing this thing. It says it's he would love first. It's this answer to what would Jesus do? Well, he would love first. And if we can focus on those things, just remind us of that, Lord. So we just thank you for this time. We know you're here. We feel you. We love you. We praise you. Amen.